The dust from the stagecoach had barely settled when Eleanor Thorne stepped onto the main street of Monticello, Utah, carrying nothing but a worn carpet bag and a reputation she couldn't shake. It was June of 1883, and the whispers had followed her all the way from Salt Lake City, spreading faster than wildfire through dry brush. The Widow Thorne, they called her, the woman foolish enough to believe a gambler could change, foolish enough to marry him anyway, and widowed within 2 years when he took a bullet over a disputed hand of cards. Eleanor held her head high as she walked toward the boarding house Mrs. Campbell had mentioned in her letter, though she could feel eyes burning into her back from every window and doorway. At 24 years old, she had already lived through more disappointment than most women twice her age, but something in her refused to harden completely. Her late husband, James, had been weak, yes, and his promises empty as an overturned bucket, but she still believed that people could change if given the right circumstances. That belief had made her a subject of mockery among the respectable women of Salt Lake City, and she suspected it would do the same here. The boarding house stood at the end of the street, a 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a sign that read Campbell's Rooms hanging slightly crooked above the door. Eleanor knocked twice and waited, adjusting the collar of her plain gray dress. The door swung open to reveal a stout woman in her 50s with kind eyes and flour dusting her apron. "You must be Mrs. Thorne," the woman said, stepping aside to let her in. "I'm Margaret Campbell. We have been corresponding about the teaching position. Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. Campbell," Eleanor replied, stepping into the cool interior. "I know my circumstances are unusual." Margaret waved a dismissive hand. "The children need a teacher and you have your certificate. That is what matters to me. Though I will warn you, some of the mothers in town are already chattering about your past. Small towns have long memories and even longer tongues." Eleanor set her bag down and met the older woman's gaze steadily. "I'm accustomed to gossip, Mrs. Campbell. What I'm not accustomed to is letting it stop me from living my life." A smile crossed Margaret's weathered face. "Good. You will need that backbone here. The schoolhouse is just up the hill, past the general store. The last teacher left 3 months ago to get married, and the children have been running wild ever since. You start Monday morning." The weekend passed in a blur of settling into her small room and preparing lesson plans. Sunday morning, Eleanor attended church services at the small chapel on the edge of town, sitting alone in the back pew while clusters of families filled the rows ahead of her. She could hear the whispers, feel the sideways glances. After the service, most people hurried past her with barely a nod, except for Margaret Campbell and a handful of others who seemed determined to judge her on her own merits rather than her past. Monday arrived with clear skies and temperatures already climbing toward uncomfortable. Eleanor dressed in her best teaching dress, a modest navy blue with white cuffs, and walked to the schoolhouse with her shoulders squared. The building was small, just one room with desks arranged in rows and a pot-bellied stove in the corner. 17 children ranging from 6 to 14 years old stared at her with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion as she introduced herself. "Good morning. I am Miss Thorne, and I will be your teacher this term," she said, deliberately using her maiden name in the classroom. "I expect respect, hard work, and honesty from each of you. In return, I promise to teach you everything I know and to treat you fairly." The morning went smoothly enough, though she could tell some of the older students were testing her boundaries. During the lunch break, as the children scattered outside to eat and play, Eleanor stood on the schoolhouse steps and surveyed the town below. Monticello was small but growing, with perhaps 200 permanent residents. The landscape was striking, all red rock formations and blue sky, so different from the city she had left behind. She was still standing there when a rider approached on a dark bay horse, kicking up dust as he came. The man dismounted with easy grace and tied his horse to the post near the school. He was tall and lean, wearing worn denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a brown hat pulled low over his eyes. A gun belt hung at his hip, but that was hardly unusual in this territory. What caught Eleanor's attention was the way he moved, cautious and deliberate, like someone accustomed to trouble. "Afternoon, madam," he said, tipping his hat as he approached. "Name is Nathan Nash. I heard the school finally got a new teacher." Eleanor studied him carefully. He looked to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-green. There was a hardness to his face, but also something else she couldn't quite name. "Mr. Nash." "Yes, I started this morning. Did you need something?" He shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "I have a younger brother, Caleb. He is 12 and he should be in school, but he has been causing trouble since our pa died last winter. I thought maybe you should know in case he shows up and acts out." "I appreciate the warning," Eleanor said, "though I prefer to form my own opinions about students rather than rely on their reputations." Nathan's eyes sharpened with something that might have been respect or skepticism. She couldn't tell which. "Fair enough. Just wanted you to know I am trying with him. It is not easy running the ranch and keeping a kid in line." "I'm sure it isn't," Eleanor replied, her voice softening slightly. "How old were you when your father passed?" "I'm 27. Been running things for 6 months now, trying to keep the place going and Caleb out of jail." He paused, then added, "I heard some talk about you in town, about your husband." Eleanor's spine stiffened. "I imagine you did." "For what it is worth, I don't put much stock in gossip," Nathan said, meeting her eyes directly. "A person's past is their own business." Something in his tone made Eleanor suspect he had his own past to live down. "Thank you, Mr. Nash. I appreciate that." He nodded, settling his hat more firmly on his head. "I will send Caleb tomorrow. If he gives you trouble, you let me know." As Nathan rode away, Eleanor found herself wondering about the Nash brothers. Orphaned and struggling by the sound of it, trying to make something of a life in this harsh landscape. She understood that better than most people realized. Caleb Nash did appear the next morning, slouching into the classroom 10 minutes late with defiance written all over his young face. He was tall for 12, already showing signs of the man he would become, with the same dark hair and unusual eyes as his brother. Eleanor assigned him a seat in the middle row and continued her lesson on arithmetic without making a fuss about his tardiness. It took exactly 2 hours for Caleb to cause his first disruption, throwing a paper wad at another boy when he thought Eleanor wasn't looking. She calmly walked over to his desk and held out her hand. "Give me whatever else you have prepared to throw." Caleb glared at her. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. You can hand them over now, or you can stay after school and write lines. Your choice." For a long moment, they locked eyes in a battle of wills. Finally, Caleb pulled 3 more crumpled papers from his pocket and slapped them into her palm. Eleanor returned to the front of the room without another word, and Caleb spent the rest of the day alternating between sullen silence and watching her with grudging curiosity. The days fell into a rhythm. Eleanor taught her students, endured the cold shoulders and whispered comments from many of the townswomen, and spent her evenings preparing lessons and reading in her small room. Caleb continued to test her boundaries, but she noticed he was also starting to complete his assignments, even if he pretended not to care. She praised his work when it was good and corrected it firmly when it wasn't, treating him exactly like every other student. 3 weeks into the term, Nathan appeared at the schoolhouse again, this time near the end of the day. He waited outside until Eleanor dismissed the children, then approached with his hat in his hands. "Miss Thorne, I wanted to thank you. Caleb has been coming home and actually doing schoolwork. I have not seen him try this hard in months." Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest at the genuine gratitude in his voice. "He is a bright boy, Mr. Nash. He just needs someone to believe in him." "You seem to believe in people more than most," Nathan observed, his eyes searching her face. "Even when they might not deserve it." "Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday," Eleanor said quietly. "Sometimes more than one chance." Nathan was silent for a moment, then asked, "Would you allow me to buy you dinner sometime, Miss Thorne? Nothing improper, just at the hotel dining room. I would like to thank you properly for what you are doing for Caleb." Eleanor hesitated. She knew what people would say if she was seen dining with a man, especially one who was essentially a stranger. But something in Nathan's earnest expression and her own loneliness made her want to accept. "That would be nice, Mr. Nash, but please call me Eleanor." "Only if you call me Nathan," he replied, and she saw the hint of a smile cross his serious face. They arranged to meet on Friday evening, which gave Eleanor several days to second-guess her decision and endure Margaret Campbell's knowing looks. When Friday arrived, Eleanor changed into her best dress, a soft green cotton that brought out the hazel in her eyes, and pinned her chestnut hair into a neat bun. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened her mother's cameo at her throat, a reminder of simpler times before poor choices and painful consequences. Nathan was waiting outside the hotel, cleaned up and wearing a pressed white shirt under his vest. He looked different without trail dust coating him, younger and more uncertain. "You look lovely," he said, and Eleanor could tell he meant it. "Thank you. You look very presentable yourself." The hotel dining room was modest but clean, with checkered tablecloths and oil lamps casting warm light. Nathan held out her chair, and they settled across from each other with menus that offered beef stew, chicken and dumplings, or roasted pork. Eleanor was acutely aware of the stares they were attracting from the other diners, but Nathan seemed oblivious, focused entirely on her. "Tell me about your ranch," Eleanor said after they had ordered. "What do you raise?" "Cattle mostly, some horses. It is not a big operation, just about 200 head on 500 acres. My father built it up from nothing over 20 years. He came out here after the war, wanted to start fresh where nobody knew him." Nathan paused, his fingers tracing the edge of his water glass. "He was a good man, but the work wore him down. Heart gave out one day while he was mending fence." "I'm sorry," Eleanor said softly. "That must have been difficult." "It was hardest on Caleb. He and Pa were close. I had already moved into the bunkhouse, was working the ranch like any other hand. But Caleb was still living in the main house, still needed a father. Now he is stuck with me instead." Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "You are doing your best. That matters more than you might think." Nathan's eyes met hers, and she saw pain there, old and deep. "I made a lot of mistakes when I was younger, Eleanor. Did things I am not proud of. Ran with a rough crowd down in Arizona territory for a couple years. Never killed anybody or robbed any banks, but I was heading that direction when my father wrote and asked me to come home. Said he needed help with the ranch. I think he really just needed to save me from myself." "And you came," Eleanor said. "You made a different choice." "I did. But people around here remember what I was like before I left. They remember the drinking and the fighting and the general worthlessness. Some of them are just waiting for me to fail, to prove I have not really changed." Eleanor reached across the table and touched his hand briefly. "I know something about that, about trying to outrun your past while everyone keeps throwing it back in your face." Their meals arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Nathan told her about growing up in Monticello, about learning to rope and ride before he could read, about his mother who had died of influenza when he was 10. Eleanor shared stories about her childhood in Colorado, her father who had been a schoolteacher and instilled in her a love of learning, her decision to marry James against her family's advice. "They told me he was no good," Eleanor admitted, stirring her coffee. "My parents, my sister, everyone. But I thought I could help him, thought my love would be enough to make him want to change. It was not. He loved gambling more than he ever loved me, and he died owing money to dangerous men. I had to sell everything we owned just to pay his debts and leave town." "That must have been terrifying," Nathan said, his voice rough with sympathy. "It was, but it also taught me something important. You cannot change someone who does not want to change. They have to want it for themselves." She looked at him directly. "Do you want to be different, Nathan? Or are you just going through the motions for your father's memory?" The question hung between them, challenging and intimate. Nathan set down his fork and considered his answer carefully. "Both, I think. It started for him to honor what he tried to teach me, but now it is for me too. And for Caleb. I want to be someone he can look up to, someone who proves you can come back from the edge." "Then you are already different," Eleanor said simply. They stayed at the restaurant until the other diners had left, and the proprietor began giving them pointed looks. Nathan walked Eleanor back to the boarding house through streets lit by a rising moon, their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. At the front door, he paused, turning his hat in his hands again. "I enjoyed this evening more than I have enjoyed anything in a long time," he said. "Would you allow me to call on you again?" Eleanor knew she should probably say no. Getting involved with another man, especially one with his own troubled history, was asking for heartbreak. But when she looked at Nathan's face in the moonlight, at the hope and vulnerability there, she found herself nodding. "I would like that." His smile was like sunrise, bright and full of promise. "Good night, Eleanor." "Good night, Nathan." The next few weeks brought a subtle shift in the rhythms of Eleanor's life. Nathan began appearing at the schoolhouse more frequently, always with some excuse about checking on Caleb or discussing his brother's progress. They would talk for a few minutes after the children left, conversations that grew longer and more personal as they became more comfortable with each other. On Sundays after church, Nathan would offer to walk Eleanor back to the boarding house, and sometimes they would detour through the countryside, Nathan pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the area. The gossip in town intensified. Eleanor heard the whispers at the general store, saw the disapproving looks from women she passed on the street. "The widow Thorne and that Nash boy," people said. "Two troublemakers finding each other like moths to flame. It won't end well, mark my words. She's a fool if she thinks he has really changed. He is a fool if he thinks she won't lead him to ruin like she did her first husband." The words stung, even though Eleanor tried not to let them. Margaret Campbell offered steady support, as did a few other women who seemed determined to judge people on their character rather than their past. But the majority of Monticello's respectable citizens had made up their minds, and nothing Eleanor or Nathan did seemed capable of changing their opinions. One Saturday in late July, Nathan invited Eleanor to visit his ranch. "I want you to see it," he said. "See what I am working toward. And Caleb has been asking when you are going to come out." Eleanor borrowed a horse from the livery and followed Nathan out of town, heading east toward the foothills. The landscape was breathtaking, all red rock and sage brush under an impossibly blue sky. After about 40 minutes of riding, they crested a rise, and Eleanor saw the Nash ranch spread out below. It was modest compared to some of the larger operations, but it had a sturdy look to it. A two-story ranch house with a wide porch, a barn, several outbuildings and corrals where horses stood switching their tails against flies. Caleb came running out of the barn as they rode up, his face lighting up in a way Eleanor rarely saw at school. "Miss Thorne, Nathan said you were coming. Do you want to see the new foal?" For the next hour, Eleanor followed Caleb around the ranch as he showed her everything with the enthusiasm of a boy on his own territory. She met the foal, a spindly-legged bay with a white star on her forehead. She saw the chickens and the cattle grazing in the distance, and the vegetable garden that was struggling in the summer heat. Nathan watched them with an expression that made Eleanor's heart beat faster, something warm and wondering in his eyes. They had lunch on the ranch house porch, cold chicken and fresh bread that Nathan had bought from a neighbor. The house was neat but clearly lacking a woman's touch, all practical furniture and bare walls. After they ate, Caleb ran off to finish his chores, leaving Nathan and Eleanor alone on the porch swing. "It is a good place," Eleanor said, looking out over the land. "You should be proud of what you are maintaining here." "I want to build it into something more," Nathan said. "Something that will last, that Caleb can inherit someday if he wants it. But it is hard work for one man, and I worry I am not doing enough, not being enough." Eleanor turned to look at him, at the worry lines between his brows and the vulnerability in his expression. "You are enough, Nathan. You're more than enough." He reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "When I am with you, I believe that. You make me want to be better, to do better." "You were already doing that before you met me," Eleanor said, squeezing his hand. "I just see what was already there." Nathan shifted closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Eleanor, I need to be honest with you. I am falling in love with you. I know it is too soon. I know we are both carrying too much history, but I cannot help how I feel." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Part of her wanted to pull away to protect herself from the possibility of more pain, but a larger part of her recognized the truth in his words because she felt it too. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I don't want to make another mistake." "I am scared too," Nathan admitted. "Scared I will disappoint you, scared I will prove everyone right who says I have not really changed. But I am more scared of not trying, of letting fear keep me from the best thing that has happened to me." Eleanor searched his face, looking for any sign of deception or false promises. All she saw was honesty and hope and a love that matched her own growing feelings. "I am falling in love with you too," she said softly. "I have been fighting it, but I cannot anymore." Nathan's smile was radiant. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed his lips against hers in a kiss that was gentle and reverent. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes as she kissed him back, allowing herself to feel hope for the first time in years. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, talking and kissing and planning a future that felt suddenly possible. When Eleanor finally rode back to town as the sun was setting, her heart felt lighter than it had in longer than she could remember. But the next week brought challenges that tested their newfound happiness. On Monday morning, Eleanor arrived at the schoolhouse to find crude words painted across the front door in red paint. "Harlot," screamed the letters, still dripping slightly. Her stomach dropped, and her hands shook as she tried to scrub the paint away before the children arrived. She managed to get most of it off, but the ghost of the words remained, a shadow on the wood. Several parents showed up shortly after the children, demanding to speak with her. They gathered in an angry cluster at the front of the classroom while the students watched with wide eyes. Thomas Wright, who owned the largest ranch in the area, appointed himself spokesman. "Miss Thorne, we have concerns about your moral character and fitness to teach our children," he announced, his voice carrying across the room. "Your association with Nathan Nash has raised serious questions." Eleanor forced herself to remain calm, even as fury burned in her chest. "Mr. Wright, my personal life is exactly that. Personal. It has no bearing on my ability to teach." "It has every bearing," interjected Martha Wright, Thomas's wife. "You are supposed to be a moral example for these children. Instead, you are consorting with a man of questionable character outside the bounds of marriage. What kind of lesson does that teach?" "I am walking out with Nathan in a perfectly respectable manner," Eleanor said, keeping her voice level. "We have done nothing improper." "You were seen at his ranch, unchaperoned," another parent called out. "That is highly inappropriate." "His 12-year-old brother was present the entire time," Eleanor countered. "And even if he was not, I am a widow, not a young girl. I am allowed to exercise my own judgment." "The judgment that led you to marry a gambling man and end up widowed and broke." Martha Wright's voice was sharp as a knife. "Forgive us if we question your decision-making, Mrs. Thorne." The use of her married name, the contempt in Martha's tone, made something snap inside Eleanor. "Yes, I made a mistake when I was young. I married a man I thought I could help, and I was wrong. I paid for that mistake with years of my life and considerable heartbreak, but I learned from it. I grew from it, and I refuse to let that one mistake define me for the rest of my life. If that makes me unfit to teach your children basic arithmetic and reading, then perhaps this is not the right place for me." The room fell silent. Several of the children were crying, including Caleb, whose face had gone pale. The parents looked uncertain now, as if they had not expected Eleanor to push back so forcefully. Finally, Reverend Thomas, who had been standing quietly at the back, spoke up. "I think we are letting our judgments run ahead of the facts. Miss Thorne has been an excellent teacher these past months. The children are learning and thriving under her instruction. Unless someone has actual evidence of immoral behavior, rather than gossip and speculation, I suggest we allow her to continue her work." "Thank you, Reverend," Eleanor said, her voice unsteady with emotion. The parents left reluctantly, still muttering among themselves. Eleanor managed to get through the rest of the school day, but her hands shook every time she wrote on the blackboard. When the children were finally dismissed, she sat at her desk and let the tears fall, exhausted and humiliated. She did not hear Nathan approach until his shadow fell across her desk. Looking up, she saw him standing in the doorway with fury etched into every line of his face. "I heard what happened. The whole town is talking about it." "Of course they are," Eleanor said bitterly, wiping her eyes. "I should have known better. I should have protected my position." "You should not have to protect anything," Nathan said, coming to kneel beside her chair. "You have done nothing wrong. We have done nothing wrong. It does not matter what we have actually done. It only matters what people think we have done." Eleanor looked at him, her heart breaking. "Maybe we should stop seeing each other. For your sake and Caleb's and for my job." "No," Nathan's voice was hard and determined. "No, I am not letting them win. I am not letting them drive you away or force us apart. I have spent too many years letting other people's opinions control my life. Not anymore. Nathan, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. I am being more reasonable than I have ever been." He took both her hands in his. "Marry me, Eleanor." She stared at him in shock. "What? Marry me? I know it is fast. I know people will say we are rushing, but I love you and I want to build a life with you. Marry me and let's show this whole town that second chances are real, that people can change and build something good out of broken pieces." Eleanor's mind raced. It was too soon, too fast, too risky. But when she looked at Nathan's face, at the love and determination there, she felt something settle into place in her heart. This was not like marrying James. Nathan was not asking her to save him or fix him. He was offering her a partnership, a chance to build something together. "Yes," she whispered. Yes, I will marry you." Nathan's face broke into a brilliant smile, and he pulled her up from the chair and into his arms, kissing her thoroughly. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Eleanor felt giddy with joy and terror in equal measure. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church, with Margaret Campbell and Caleb as witnesses, and a handful of other supportive townspeople in attendance. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony, his voice warm with approval as he pronounced them husband and wife. Eleanor wore a simple cream-colored dress that Margaret had helped her make, and Nathan wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed and his eyes shining with happiness. The reception was held at the boarding house, where Margaret had prepared a feast despite the short notice. There was roasted chicken and fresh bread, vegetables from her garden, and a beautiful cake that must have taken her hours to make. The guests ate and drank and offered toasts to the new couple, while Eleanor and Nathan could barely look away from each other long enough to eat. As the sun began to set, Nathan helped Eleanor into the wagon, and they set off for the ranch with Caleb riding alongside on his own horse. Eleanor's possessions, such as they were already packed in the back. She was leaving the boarding house and her teaching position, at least for now, to become a ranch wife and mother to a 12-year-old boy who desperately needed stability and love. The transition was not easy. Eleanor had never run a ranch before, had never cooked for working men or dealt with cattle or any of the 100 other tasks that came with her new life. But Nathan was patient, teaching her what she needed to know and working alongside her. Caleb, after an initial period of uncertainty, began to warm to having Eleanor as a permanent presence in the house. She helped him with his schoolwork in the evenings and listened to his stories, and slowly began to earn his trust and affection. The ranch itself demanded constant work. There were fences to mend and animals to care for, and a garden to maintain and endless repairs that came with old buildings and harsh weather. Nathan hired on 2 ranch hands to help with the cattle work, young men named Samuel and Joseph, who were respectful and hardworking. Eleanor learned to cook for 4 hungry men, to preserve food for the winter, to make soap and candles and all the other necessities of ranch life. The town remained divided on the marriage. Some people softened their stance, impressed by Eleanor's willingness to take on such responsibility. Others remained convinced that it was only a matter of time before the marriage fell apart. Eleanor learned to hold her head high when she went into town for supplies, to ignore the whispers and pointed looks. Nathan was always by her side on these trips, a solid and reassuring presence. As summer faded into fall, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complex mix of joy and fear. She had always wanted children, but her marriage to James had never produced any. Now, at 25, she was going to become a mother. She told Nathan one evening after Caleb had gone to bed, watching his face anxiously for his reaction. Nathan's response was everything she could have hoped for. His face lit up with wonder and delight, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her with a gentleness that made her eyes sting with tears. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Eleanor asked, needing to hear the words. "I am more than happy. I am blessed beyond anything I deserve." Nathan pulled back to look at her face, his hands cupping her cheeks. "You have given me everything, Eleanor. A reason to be better, a family, and now a child. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too," Eleanor whispered. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and winter. Eleanor's belly grew round, and she had to let out her dresses and move more carefully through her daily tasks. Nathan became almost comically protective, constantly worried she was working too hard or lifting too much. Caleb was excited about becoming a brother, though he tried to hide it behind teenage nonchalance. In February of 1884, during a cold snap that left ice on the water troughs, Eleanor went into labor. Nathan rode like mad to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Henderson, while Caleb stayed with Eleanor, holding her hand and looking terrified. The labor lasted 18 hours, long and difficult, but finally, in the early morning hours, Eleanor delivered a healthy baby boy. Nathan cradled his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he kept saying. "Eleanor, he is perfect." They named him Thomas James Nash, after Nathan's father and Eleanor's late husband. It felt right to honor both men, one who had saved Nathan and one who had taught Eleanor hard lessons about love and loss. Little Thomas was a good baby, content to nurse and sleep and observe the world with serious dark eyes that reminded Eleanor of Nathan. The arrival of the baby seemed to shift something in the town. It was harder to maintain disapproval in the face of a young family clearly working hard and building a life together. People began to nod at Eleanor in the street again, to stop and admire the baby when she brought him to town. It was not universal acceptance, but it was progress. Caleb proved to be a natural with his baby brother, often volunteering to hold him or rock him when Thomas was fussy. Eleanor watched the boy she had once struggled to teach blossom into a responsible young man, and she felt a fierce pride in how far he had come. Nathan noticed it too, often commenting on how much Caleb had matured since Eleanor came into their lives. Spring brought new challenges and new joys. The ranch had survived the winter better than expected, with minimal loss of cattle and no major damage to the buildings. Nathan began talking about expanding the operation, maybe buying the adjacent property that was coming up for sale. Eleanor supported his dreams, even as she juggled caring for an infant and maintaining the household. One warm day in April, Eleanor was hanging laundry on the line behind the house, Thomas sleeping peacefully in a basket at her feet, when she heard horses approaching. Looking up, she was surprised to see Thomas and Martha Wright riding into the yard. Her body tensed automatically, remembering their harsh words at the schoolhouse. Nathan emerged from the barn, his expression wary. "Mr. Wright, Mrs. Wright, what can I do for you?" Thomas Wright dismounted, looking uncomfortable. "We came to speak with you both if you have a moment." Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to stand beside Nathan, drawing strength from his presence. "Of course." Martha Wright was staring at baby Thomas in his basket, her expression softening. "How old is he now?" "Just over 2 months," Eleanor said cautiously. "He is beautiful." Martha looked up at Eleanor, and there was genuine regret in her eyes. "Mrs. Nash, I owe you an apology. We both do. The things I said to you at the schoolhouse were cruel and unfair. I was judging you based on gossip and my own narrow-mindedness, not on your actual character." Eleanor was too stunned to respond immediately. Thomas Wright cleared his throat and continued, "We have been watching you both this past year. The way you have built a life together, the way you have raised young Caleb and now your son. It is clear that we were wrong about you, both of you. You have shown this town what real redemption and second chances look like." "Thank you," Nathan said, his voice gruff with emotion. "That means more than you might think." "The reason we came," Martha said, "is that the school board has asked me to extend an invitation. We would like you to consider returning to teach, Mrs. Nash. Perhaps in the fall when your son is a bit older. We realize we treated you shamefully, and we would like the opportunity to make amends." Eleanor looked at Nathan, who nodded encouragingly. "I would have to discuss it with my husband," she said carefully. "And it would depend on the circumstances, but I appreciate the offer." After the Wrights left, Eleanor sank onto the porch steps, feeling shaken. Nathan sat beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "What are you thinking?" I am thinking that maybe, just maybe, we have proven something important, Eleanor said slowly. That people can change, that second chances are real, that love can build something lasting even on broken foundations. We have proven that, Nathan agreed. Every single day we prove it. Eleanor leaned into him, watching their son sleep in the dappled sunlight. Do you think I should go back to teaching? I think you should do whatever makes you happy, Nathan said. If you want to teach again, we will make it work. If you want to stay home with Thomas, that is fine too. Whatever you choose, I support you. Eleanor considered the question over the following weeks. She missed teaching, missed the satisfaction of watching children learn and grow. But she also loved being home with Thomas, loved the life she had built on the ranch. Finally, she came up with a compromise. She would offer to tutor students in the afternoons, children who were struggling or needed extra help. She could do it from home, with Thomas nearby, and still contribute to the education of Monticello's children. The school board accepted her proposal gratefully, and soon Eleanor had a regular stream of students coming to the ranch several afternoons a week. She set up a teaching area in the front room, and Nathan built her a proper desk and shelves for books. The children loved coming to the ranch, often arriving early so they could see the animals before their lessons. As the months passed, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered under Nathan's careful management. Caleb, now 13, took on more responsibility and began to seriously consider his future. Thomas grew from an infant into a chubby, happy baby who laughed at everything and seemed to inherit his father's easy temperament. On their first wedding anniversary, Nathan took Eleanor on a picnic to a spot overlooking the valley. They sat on a blanket under a cottonwood tree, eating cold chicken and bread while Thomas crawled around exploring the grass. The view was magnificent, red rocks glowing in the afternoon sun, the sky vast and impossibly blue. A year ago, I was standing at the altar promising to love you forever, Nathan said, taking Eleanor's hand. It felt like forever then. Now it does not feel like nearly long enough. Eleanor smiled, squeezing his fingers. We have many more years ahead of us, God willing. I want to give you everything, Nathan said seriously. I want to make this ranch successful enough that you never have to worry. I want to fill our house with children if that is what you want. I want to prove every single day that you made the right choice in believing in me. You already prove that, Eleanor said softly, just by being who you are. You are a good man, Nathan Nash. You always were, underneath the mistakes and the rough edges. I just saw it before you did. You saved me, Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. You and Caleb and this life. You saved me from becoming someone I would have hated. Eleanor shook her head. You saved yourself. I just gave you a reason to try. They kissed then, a sweet lingering kiss that tasted like promise and permanence. Thomas chose that moment to crawl over and pull himself up on his father's leg, babbling happily. Nathan scooped him up, laughing, and Eleanor watched her husband and son with a fullness in her heart she had never imagined possible. The next few years brought both challenges and blessings. A drought in 1885 tested the ranch's resources, forcing Nathan to make difficult decisions about which cattle to keep and which to sell. But they survived it, emerging leaner but stronger. In 1886, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, a tiny girl with Eleanor's hazel eyes and a will of iron. Caleb, now 15, was becoming a skilled rancher in his own right, taking over more of the daily operations and allowing Nathan time to pursue expansion opportunities. The town's attitude toward the Nash family had shifted almost completely. What had once been disapproval and mockery had transformed into grudging respect, and in many cases, genuine admiration. People pointed to Nathan and Eleanor as proof that people could overcome their pasts, that second chances were worth giving. Young women in town sought Eleanor's advice when they were considering suitors. Parents asked Nathan to speak to their wayward sons, hoping he could reach them in ways they could not. It was a responsibility neither of them took lightly. Eleanor often thought about how close she had come to giving up, to letting the mockery and judgment drive her away from Monticello and from Nathan. If she had listened to the voices telling her she was a fool, if she had let fear overrule hope, she would have missed out on the greatest love of her life. One evening in the summer of 1887, Eleanor stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to maintain. Thomas, now 3 years old, was playing with wooden blocks at her feet. Baby Sarah was asleep in her cradle inside. Caleb was out checking the cattle with the ranch hands, and Nathan was in the barn finishing up the evening chores. She heard his footsteps before she saw him, felt his arms come around her waist from behind. Nathan rested his chin on her shoulder and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. "What are you thinking about?" he asked finally. "About how lucky we are," Eleanor said. "About how easily this could have gone differently." "But it did not," Nathan said firmly. "We chose each other. We chose to believe in second chances and redemption and love, and look what we built." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. At 28, Eleanor still saw the echoes of the uncertain widow she had been, but she also saw someone stronger, someone who had learned to trust her own judgment and stand firm in the face of opposition. Nathan, at 31, had lost the hard edge he had carried when she first met him. His face was weathered from years of ranch work, but his eyes were clear and content. "I love you," she said simply. "I loved you then, and I love you now, and I will love you always." "And I love you," Nathan replied. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Eleanor Nash. You and our children and this life. You gave me something to live for, something to be proud of." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, holding each other close. Inside the house, Sarah began to fuss, and Thomas called out that he was hungry. They smiled against each other's lips, recognizing the sounds of their life together, the beautiful chaos of family and home. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Caleb eventually married a sweet girl named Anna from a neighboring ranch, and they settled on a piece of property Nathan deeded to him, building their own home and starting their own family. Eleanor and Nathan had 2 more children, twin boys born in 1889, who they named Samuel and Joseph, after the loyal ranch hands who had become like family. The ranch grew into one of the most successful operations in the region, known for quality cattle and horses, and for the integrity of its owners. Nathan never forgot the lessons of his wild youth, never stopped being grateful for the second chance his father and Eleanor had given him. He treated his workers fairly, paid his debts on time, and became known as a man whose word was his bond. Eleanor eventually returned to teaching part-time when her youngest children started school themselves. The schoolhouse had been expanded, and now she taught the older students while a younger teacher handled the primary grades. She loved watching the children of people who had once mocked her learn and grow, loved being part of the community in a meaningful way. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1893, Nathan surprised Eleanor with a new house. Not a replacement for the ranch house, but a beautiful home built just for them, incorporating all the things she had mentioned wanting over the years. It had a big kitchen with a modern stove, a separate room for her books and teaching materials, large windows that let in abundant light, and a wide porch perfect for watching sunsets. "You built this," Eleanor asked, walking through the rooms in awe. When? How did I not know? I have been working on it for 2 years, Nathan admitted. Getting supplies little by little, working on it when you thought I was fixing fences or checking cattle. Caleb and the boys helped, and Anna kept you distracted whenever you got suspicious. Eleanor turned to him with tears streaming down her face. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. You deserve beautiful things, Nathan said, pulling her close. You deserve everything good in this world, Eleanor. You took a broken-down cowboy with a bad reputation and loved him into becoming someone worth knowing. This house is just a small way of saying thank you for believing in me. I did not make you into anything, Eleanor protested. I just saw what was already there. Then thank you for seeing me, Nathan said, kissing her forehead. Thank you for giving me a second chance when everyone else had written me off. Thank you for teaching me what real love looks like. They moved into the new house that week, filling it with their furniture and belongings and children and laughter. The old ranch house became a bunkhouse for the workers, and the new house became the heart of the Nash family's growing legacy. As the century drew to a close, Eleanor often reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place. She thought about the scared young widow who had arrived in Monticello with nothing but a carpet bag and a stubborn belief in second chances. She thought about the mockery and judgment she had endured, the way people had dismissed her and Nathan as foolish and doomed. But they had not been foolish, and they had not been doomed. They had been brave enough to choose hope over fear, love over judgment, and possibility over past mistakes. They had built something real and lasting, a family and a life that stood as testament to the power of believing in people's capacity to change. In 1899, on a crisp October afternoon, Eleanor and Nathan sat together on the porch of their home, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Caleb and Anna had 4 children now, and they were visiting for Sunday dinner along with all the Nash siblings. The yard was full of laughter and noise, children ranging from toddlers to teenagers chasing each other and playing games. 17 years, Nathan said wonderingly. 17 years since you stepped off that stagecoach and into my life. 16 since we married, Eleanor added, leaning her head on his shoulder. The best 16 years of my life. You ever regret it? Nathan asked quietly. Marrying me so quickly, taking on Caleb and the ranch and everything that came with it. Eleanor lifted her head to look at him directly. Never. Not once. You are the love of my life, Nathan Nash. Everything else, all the challenges and difficulties, were just part of our story. And I would not change a single chapter. Nathan's eyes were suspiciously bright as he took her hand and brought it to his lips. I am the luckiest man alive. We are both lucky, Eleanor corrected. Lucky that we found each other. Lucky that we were brave enough to try. Lucky that we had people who eventually came around and supported us. Thomas, now 15 and already taller than his father, came running up to the porch. Ma, Pa, Anna is ready to serve dinner. She says come on before everything gets cold. They rose together, hands still linked, and walked into the house filled with family and love, and the rich smells of a feast prepared with care. Around the long table sat their children and grandchildren, Caleb and Anna, the ranch hands who had become part of the family, and Margaret Campbell, who had never stopped being Eleanor's staunchest supporter. As they all joined hands to say grace, Eleanor looked around at the faces of the people she loved, the family she and Nathan had built from broken pieces and stubborn hope. She thought about the woman who had been mocked for believing in second chances and the cowboy who had become hers. She thought about how close they had come to missing this, to letting fear and judgment keep them from each other. Nathan squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back, a silent communication of love and gratitude that needed no words. After the prayer, the room erupted in conversation and laughter as dishes were passed and stories were shared. Eleanor served food and listened to her children's chatter and felt Nathan's presence beside her like an anchor and a blessing. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Nathan and Eleanor lay in their bed talking softly in the darkness. "Do you remember that first day at the schoolhouse?" Nathan asked. "When I came to warn you about Caleb." "I remember thinking you looked dangerous," Eleanor admitted. "All hard edges and watchful eyes. But I also remember thinking there was something else there, something worth knowing. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Nathan said. "And also the most terrifying, because you looked at me like you could see straight through to my bones, like you could see all the things I was trying to hide." "I saw a man who was trying," Eleanor said simply. "That is all I ever needed to see." They were quiet for a moment and then Nathan spoke again. "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything, for believing in me, for loving me, for building this life with me, for showing me that second chances are not just possible, they are worth fighting for." "Thank you for being worth believing in," Eleanor replied. "Thank you for loving me enough to take a risk. Thank you for proving that people really can change when they want it badly enough." They kissed in the darkness, a sweet, tender kiss that held 16 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwoods and the stars wheeled overhead, and the ranch settled into its nightly rhythms. Inside, Eleanor and Nathan held each other close, two people who had been mocked and dismissed and written off, who had found each other and built something beautiful from their broken pieces. The years that followed brought more grandchildren and great-grandchildren, more seasons of plenty and seasons of struggle. The ranch passed eventually to Thomas, who ran it with the same integrity his father had taught him. Eleanor continued teaching until she was well into her 60s, finally retiring to spend more time with her expanding family. Nathan and Eleanor grew old together, their hair turning silver and their steps slowing, but their love never dimming. They celebrated 50 years of marriage in 1933, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a vast family tree that had grown from the union of two people brave enough to believe in second chances. On a quiet evening in the spring of 1935, Eleanor and Nathan sat together on the porch of the home he had built for her all those years ago. Eleanor was 76 now, Nathan 79, and they moved slowly these days, their bodies worn from decades of hard work and good living. But their hands still found each other automatically, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "You know what I am most proud of?" Nathan asked, his voice quieter than it used to be but still strong. "What?" Eleanor asked, turning to look at his beloved face, weathered and lined but still the face of the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "That we proved them all wrong," Nathan said. "Everyone who said we would not last, everyone who mocked you for believing people could change. We proved that love and second chances and hard work can build something that endures." Eleanor smiled, reaching up to touch his cheek. "We did not prove them wrong, my love. We proved them irrelevant. What they thought never mattered. What mattered was what we believed, what we built, what we gave to each other and our children and this community." "You always know the right thing to say," Nathan said, turning his head to kiss her palm. "You always have." They sat together, as the sun set over the land they had worked and loved for more than 5 decades, comfortable in the silence of two people who had shared a lifetime. Around them, the ranch bustled with activity as their grandchildren and great-grandchildren went about the business of maintaining the Nash legacy. Inside the house, preparations were underway for Sunday dinner, a tradition that had continued every week for as long as anyone could remember. Eleanor thought about the young widow she had been, arriving in Monticello with nothing but a carpet bag and a stubborn refusal to let her past define her future. She thought about the cowboy with the troubled history who had seen in her a kindred spirit, someone else fighting to be more than their mistakes. She thought about the love they had built, the family they had created, the life they had shared. No regrets. Nathan asked softly, echoing the question he had asked so many times over the years. "Not a single one," Eleanor replied, just as she always did. "You were my second chance, Nathan Nash, and you were the best choice I ever made." "You were mine," Nathan said. "And I thank God every day that you were brave enough to believe in me." As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared overhead, Nathan and Eleanor rose slowly and made their way inside to join their family for dinner. They moved carefully, supporting each other as they had always done. Two people who had found each other against the odds and built something beautiful from their shared belief in redemption and love. The dining room was full of noise and laughter. Multiple generations gathered around the table that had been extended and extended again to accommodate the growing family. As Eleanor looked around at the faces of her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, she felt a deep satisfaction settle over her. This was what second chances looked like. This was what happened when you chose to believe in people's capacity for change, when you loved bravely despite fear and judgment. Nathan caught her eye from across the table and smiled. That same smile that had made her heart flutter 52 years ago, and Eleanor smiled back. They had built a good life together, a life worth fighting for, worth believing in. They had proved that second chances were not just possible but precious, that love could transform and redeem, that two broken people could create something whole and beautiful together. As the meal progressed and the stories flowed, Eleanor reached under the table and found Nathan's hand, squeezing it gently. He squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was a lifetime of love and partnership and shared dreams realized. The woman who had been mocked for believing in second chances had found hers in a cowboy with a troubled past. Together, they had built a legacy that would endure for generations, a testament to the power of hope and love and the courage to try again. And that, Eleanor thought as she looked around at her family and felt Nathan's hand warm in hers, was worth every moment of mockery, every challenge, every doubt. They had created something beautiful from their broken pieces, and nothing in the world could diminish that truth.